Top 10 Bizarre Ways Foods Were Discovered. It is abnormal to consider food being found, however there probably has been a first time that a human ever placed a food in their mouth. It was a daring or urgent individual who initially observed a shellfish and thought, "Yes, I need to eat that." Sometimes the disclosure of a food was for such a long time in the past that its causes have gotten incredible. At times, however, we know precisely when and how a food was found. Here are 10 of the beginning accounts of regular nourishments and beverages. Tea. Tea is one of the most mainstream drinks on the planet. Its caffeine content is moderately mellow, so it is immediately both animating and quieting without giving you a bad case of nerves. How did the leaves of the tea plant become so exceptionally prized? In one Chinese legend, the properties of tea were found by the Emperor of China. It was in 2737 BC that the sovereign Shennong wound up sitting under a tree. He turned out to heat up some water when a whirlwind floated a few leaves down into the percolating pot. As they diffused in the water, the fragile smell of tea filled the territory. Shennong drank the main cup of tea on record. It was fortunate there wasn't a winged animal sitting in the tree, or we may be drinking droppings today. It appears to be more probable that tea was found as having therapeutic properties sooner or later, and joined into Chinese medication prior to developing into cutting-edge drink. The Chinese legend is not the main story of its root. In one Indian story, a Buddhist known as Bodhidharma promised to ponder for a very long time without dozing. At the point when he nodded off following 9 years, he was so furious he removed his eyelids. At the point where they struck the ground, they changed into tea plants, and tea became one route for priests to fight off rest. Coffee. Given that caffeine is exceptionally addictive, it is justifiable that tea and espresso have become staples in our day-by-day lives. Espresso's actual root is lost to the fogs of time, however the legends of how it was first found are pretty stimulating. In one story from Ethiopia, it was a goat herd called Kaldi who previously saw the interesting properties of espresso beans. He turned out to be out with his goats when he saw them eating berries from a specific plant and afterward getting spirited and jumping about. The goats additionally dozed that evening. At the point when he enlightened nearby priests regarding his disclosure, they found that espresso encouraged them keep awake to play out their petitions late at night. In an Islamic story, it was an outcast from Mecca who ended up starving in the desert. At the point when he bit on the berries from the espresso tree, his craving disappeared, however they were excessively severe. So he cooked the beans, yet they turned out to be excessively hard. Next he bubbled them to mollify them, however rather found the water changing over into a heavenly blend. Espresso, the beverage, was conceived. Popsicles. The popsicle is one of the most essential joys of a truly blistering summer. It appears to be an easy decision of a thought. Take some beautiful and a heavenly squeeze. Push a stick in it, and freeze. Unquestionably, these have existed since the beginning of time. Truth be told, we know the specific second they were first created. It was in 1905 when a little youngster called Frank Epperson chose to make some soft drink by blending powdered beverage and water in with a wooden stick. He got occupied notwithstanding and left his glass of incomplete beverage in the back nursery. At the point when he restored the following morning, the beverage had frozen strong and the stirrer gave it a helpful handle. Epperson named his creation the Epsicle and even picked up a patent on his development that was a frozen dessert of appealing appearance, which can be advantageously devoured without tainting by contact with the hand and without the requirement for a plate, spoon, fork, or another implement. The name Epsicle didn't win numerous fans nonetheless, so it was rechristened as the Popsicle. At the point when it neglected to get Epperson much cash flow, he offered the plan to an organization who added a subsequent stick, making the snappable frozen treat we know today. Sweeteners. Sugar has been denounced as of late as maybe the most noticeably terrible food that anybody can eat. Before sugar was derided, it was sugar supplanting sugars that were believed to be unadulterated insidiousness. Today, most sugars have been completely tried by researchers and discovered to be protected. Yet, it was an absence of lab security that prompted the formation of some sweeteners. Aspartame was found when a researcher called James M. Schlatter was dealing with an enemy of ulcer drug in his lab. Expecting to turn a page on a book he was perusing, he licked his finger. This is commonly not energized in most present-day labs, yet Schlatter saw that his finger was amazingly sweet. Cyclamate is a now prohibited sugar that previously arisen in 1937 when Michael Spader halted his work on the fever medication to have a smoke in his lab, which was evidently something you could do during the 30s. Spader discovered his cigarette was sweet and acknowledged he may have found a counterfeit sugar. Maple syrup. By and large, we possibly consider trees a wellspring of food when we are pondering their natural product. Maple syrup, anyway, is the result of people basically cutting a tree and drinking its blood. How did people sort out that maple trees have sweet squeeze inside them? It is notable that the indigenous individuals of North America were creating maple syrup sometime before European pilgrims showed up. Maple syrup does not emerge from the tree in the structure we pour it onto our flapjacks. The syrup begins as a watery liquid and must be bubbled into a thick syrup. Indigenous individuals did not bubble maple syrup, however. They would leave maple sap out in a shallow vessel, and when the water froze, the syrup would be left behind. According to one legend, Prince Glooskap found that his kin were relaxing their work since they were drinking syrup directly from a tree. To stop this incident again, he added water to the trees and made the sweet liquid just descend up in the trees in spring. A few clans name Nen or Boju as the god who halted maple syrup shaping in its unadulterated structure in trees. A more sensible beginning for maple syrup comes from the story of Mokwa. At the point when she was cooking some mousse for her significant other, she ran out of water. Incapable to find any, she utilized the sap from a maple tree. During the cooking, it came down into a syrup that evidently goes truly well with moose meat. The sandwich. Sandwiches are one of the most famous methods of having lunch. For hundreds or thousands of years, bread has been a staple of numerous individuals' eating regimens. A great many people would have most of their calories from bread. A lunch would have been a portion of bread and some other thing to give it a touch of flavor. We can't know who the primary individual was to cut their bread and put their supper between the cuts. However, we do realize who promoted it. John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, lived in the 18th century in a Britain that was intensely dependent on betting. The gentry would invest their energy at the gaming tables, winning, or all the more regularly, losing fortunes. For some, like the Earl of Sandwich, even a second from the table was a second lost. So as opposed to taking a break to eat a dinner, he requested the cook to bring him something he could eat without getting up. This ended up being cuts of bread with flavorful fillings between them. The bread halted his hands getting oily. You didn't require a blade and fork. Betting could proceed. Regardless of whether this was the genuine beginning of the sandwich is discussed, however, for the Earl it was maybe his most enduring commitment. Tofu. Tofu is a somewhat tasteless fixing with an incredible beautiful cause. It has a long history that goes back at any rate 2,000 years. Eventually soy milk was blended in with something to make it coagulate into something looking like cheddar. How this progression was first made is a disputable subject. The most essential hypothesis is that debased ocean salt was added to soy milk to season it. In the event that there was ocean weed or magnesium salts in the blend, it would make the soy milk coagulate. This is totally conceivable, however not as intriguing as the other legend of its origin. According to one story, it was a Chinese sovereign of the Han administration called Liu who originally made tofu. Liu was an incredible researcher and appears to have had an affection for soybeans. One legend makes him concoct soy milk for his grandma when she viewed the beans as excessively hard to chew. Apparently it was while Liu was exploring interminability and speculative chemistry that he thought of the formula for tofu. While a great many people would be glad to have created a meat substitute, Liu was said to have really thought of a formula for everlasting status. One record sees Liu becoming more youthful from eating tofu. He at that point grew wings and rose to the sky to live until the end of time. That is one method of urging individuals to eat tofu. Champagne. Broadly, champagne is just truly champagne on the off chance that it comes from the Champagne district of France, else it is simply shimmering disillusionment. Considering the social cachet that accompanies the name champagne, it is anything but difficult to perceive how legends could jump up like the air pockets in a glass. The grape plantations of the Champagne district had been battling to deliver white wine from red grapes for ages until a Benedictine priest named Dom Pierre Perignon consummated a technique. There was one issue, however: his wine had risen in. As per legend, the air pockets caused Perignon to shout to his sibling priests, "Come rapidly, I am tasting the stars." In reality, it appears to be that Dom Perignon invested most of his energy attempting to dispose of the air pockets in his wine. Another fantasy about champagne is that the state of the champagne car was designed according to the bosoms of Marie Antoinette or Madame de Pompadour. Perhaps the best legend about champagne is that it was the main shimmering wine. Any individual who has attempted home fermenting will realize that you can frequently get undesirable air pockets in your containers. In any event, there is proof from 30 years ago, Dom Perignon's supernatural innovation, that shows the English were making shining wine on purpose. Our wine coopers of late occasions utilized tremendous amounts of sugar and molasses to a wide range of wines to make them drink energetic and shimmering and to give them soul. Worcestershire sauce. English food has a sketchy standing abroad, and the starting point story of Worcestershire sauce is probably not going to change that. Worcestershire sauce is a fairly impactful and solid sauce produced using fixings like anchovy, vinegar, onion, sugar, garlic, and flavors. As indicated by the Leon Perrins organization that created the first Worcestershire sauce, the primary cluster was as unpalatable as the portrayal of the fixings suggests. Apparently Lord Sandys, a blue blood who had been British legislative leader of Bengal, gotten back to England with an energy for Indian flavors. He visited Leon Perrins, a couple of scientists, to check whether they could reproduce the sauce he needed. Their first attempt was unpleasant to such an extent that they discarded it. In any case, the pair had made up 2 barrels of the stuff and just discarded one. The other remained in their basement for another couple of years. When they came to clear some space for capacity, the pair saw the surrendered sauce and opened the cover. Doing what we do as a whole do when confronted with inner old, earthy colored fluid, they tasted it. Also, it was delectable. Worcestershire sauce is currently found in organizers here and there Britain. Cornflakes. In the event that you think all that you read on the web, at that point you know uncertainty, definitely realize that Kellogg's cornflakes were developed as a feature of a campaign against the indecencies of masturbation. Like most realities that show up on the web, things significantly more unpredictable and more unusual than they seem. It is genuine that Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, creator of the cornflake, was a specialist nutritionist and strict man with some bizarre thoughts. In his books he uncovered that masturbation was the reason for an assortment of ailments from epilepsy, to flightiness, to terrible stance. One of his remedies for these issues was tasteless food, and a lot of it. Different fixes were embedding silver wires into the prepucium, touching the clitoris with carbolic corrosive. Cornflakes might have been essential for his enemy of masturbation crusade, yet they were never showcased as such. The genuine story behind the formation of cornflakes is similarly intriguing, without zeroing in on self-misuse nonetheless. The Kellogg siblings ran a sanatorium at Battle Creek. While they were looking for a simple-to-process nourishment for the patients, they cooked some corn. At the point where they got occupied, the cooked corn was left out for the time being and turned stale. Being frugal just as well being cognizant, the pair chose to cook the corn at any rate by squeezing them into thick scones. This didn't work, yet it made slight chips that the siblings adored. Absence of taste of the flavorless oat demonstrated a hit. However, no information has been delivered on cornflakes' impact on masturbation. Thank you for watching this video. Like, share and buy in my channel.